Greetings everyone! This is a quick promo before the video begins. If you're new to the channel and you didn't know it yet, I am actually an author in addition to being a YouTuber, and I have 2 books that you can get on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1 and The Occult Mafia. The first is sort of a bizarre, absurdist kaiju anime mashup, and the other is a horror noir story with a hint of a western thrown in there. They're both set in the same universe, and at this point have received mostly positive reviews, so you might want to check them out. I've provided Amazon links for both of them down in the description. They're both available in either paperback or Amazon Kindle, and Operation Red Dragon is also available in audiobook form. So if either of these strike your fancy and you want to support a struggling artist, feel free to go down and check out either one or both of them. Alright, the shameless self-promotion is out of the way, we can get on with the video. Thank you all for your support.
For decades, people have called for serious research to be directed towards the phenomenon which has come to be known as the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie. And for decades, that call went unanswered. Serious scientific researchers have long considered the phenomenon an example of fringe science, something so outlandish that it is unworthy of serious scrutiny, since it is so obviously not real. They reason that there cannot possibly be anything there, so what would be the point to investigating? This mindset, of course, did not stop hundreds of photos, videos, and mysterious sonar readings of something large in the water from materializing on a regular basis. In spite of this, the Loch Ness Monster remained off the table. Until recently, that is. In 2019, Professor Niel Gemmell of New Zealand did something most scientists would balk at. He decided to do a proper scientific survey of Loch Ness using a new technique called eDNA sampling. For the uninitiated, eDNA is short for environmental DNA, and refers to genetic traces left behind by living creatures as they pass through certain areas. New techniques allow scientists to take samples of the environment and extract those traces to determine which animals are or were present. For example, a container of dirt from the Canadian wilderness should contain the DNA of any caribou which reside therein. Professor Gemmell decided to apply this technique to Loch Ness, reasoning that this could very well settle the matter of Nessie's existence once and for all by definitively showing us what resides in the lake. It was a bit of a ploy in some respects, as Gemmell was using the notoriety of Nessie to draw greater attention to this new method, but that's ultimately not a bad thing. Now, any expedition has its limits, especially when it comes to time and budget, but Professor Gemmell made good use of his time at Loch Ness. 250 water samples were taken from the lake, each sample from various locations and various depths to ensure that as wide a range as possible was covered. Once the samples were collected, they were all run through the same test process through which the eDNA was extracted. The results made global headlines, but as is so often the case these days, those headlines aren't necessarily representative of the truth. I'll provide links to the official report so you can read it for yourself, but here's the basic summary. Professor Gemmell's final report stated that no DNA was recovered that matched anything reptilian, either prehistoric or contemporary. There was also no DNA recovered to indicate sharks, catfish, or other fish species that would be unusual to find at Loch Ness. Various species of known fish, birds, land-based mammals, and even humans were detected. What really stood out, though, was the vast quantity of eel DNA recovered, which indicated them as being very prevalent in the water. Meanwhile, between 20 to 25% of the DNA samples, depending on which source you listen to, was categorized as unidentifiable. Based on this, Professor Gemmell felt confident in ruling out plesiosaurs and out-of-place fish species as candidates for Nessie. He did, however, state that the prevalence of eel DNA, combined with reliable eyewitness descriptions, suggests that what people have been seeing could be a variety of eel. Whether it is a new species of eel or a large variant of a known species, he could not say. Large quantities of eel DNA does not mean it's the DNA of large eels after all. Even so, that was the theory he felt best fit the evidence. As such, that was what most news sources ran with when the results were announced. Some sources boldly proclaimed that this proved the Loch Ness Monster was a giant eel all along, while others just as boldly proclaimed that this killed the myth of Nessie once and for all. Two extremes, neither fully representing what the professor actually said. In fact, many of these articles omitted some important details from the final report. For starters, the fact that roughly 1/4, give or take, of the recovered DNA could not be identified was either downplayed or ignored by most news outlets, even though it is a significant detail. It leaves us with two questions. First, why couldn't this DNA be categorized? Second, what species are present within that uncategorized quadrant? Currently, we have no answers to either question. Perhaps the samples were contaminated or degraded, or maybe something went wrong with the extraction process. Perhaps this quadrant is comprised entirely of known species, or maybe therein resides an unidentified monster. At this point, it's anyone's guess. Another anomaly that rarely gets mentioned is how, despite the number of species identified in the test, some were missed entirely. We know, for example, that seals and otters frequent Loch Ness, yet neither species turned up in the samples. Unless they somehow wound up in the unclassified section, it appears they were completely missed. This naturally raises the question of what else might have potentially been missed. Lest you think I'm about to jump to some wild conclusion, you may want to consider the following statement I'm about to read in full. The following can be found at www.lochnesshunters.com, link in the description. Quote, "Environmental eDNA metabarcoding approaches are powerful but limited by the genome regions they target. We know we have not identified every species present in Loch Ness, but we doubt we have missed any major groups of living things. That we identified all known fish species from Loch Ness in our eDNA data provides some reassurance our approach was sound. That said, any survey must accept that it may not find all species present because sampling effort is inadequate, the species is migratory, e.g. sturgeon, small or low abundance in the system, sheds cells at low rates, or is missed by the metabarcoding. Loch Ness is vast, and given that eDNA signals in water dissipate quickly, lasting days to weeks at most, there remains the possibility that there is something present that we did not detect because we sampled in the wrong places at the wrong time, or our metabarcoding method could not detect Nessie because the sequence could not be matched with anything in the sequence databases. Our investigation, like every investigation before it, has no definitive proof of the monster. Proving something does not exist is pretty much impossible. We do, however, have a further theory to test, that of the giant eel, and it may be worth exploring this in more detail." Unquote. I'll bet you haven't heard that sentiment expressed very often in articles you've read on the subject. In summary, it basically means that although the results are pointing in a particular direction, that of the giant eel theory, there's still a margin for error that means the question has not truly been answered yet. Gemmell himself states that further investigation is needed before we can close the book on the Loch Ness Monster. We've potentially taken one step closer to solving the mystery, but we've still got a long way to go before we reach the end. One of the most important steps in the scientific method is repeating the results of an experiment, because it is through repeated results that theories become verified facts. Despite the fact that 250 water samples were taken, precisely one DNA test has been run on Loch Ness. I have said from the beginning that more tests are needed, and Professor Gemmell echoes that. It's disheartening then that so many people, especially those in the mainstream news media, don't seem to think that's necessary. Then again, mainstream news has not been reliable for a very long time now, so I can't really say I'm surprised. Given the presence of unclassified material and the seemingly total absence of known entities from the final tally, I personally doubt that a second sweep of Loch Ness would produce the exact same results as the first. But it is my hope that a second sweep will turn up better results than the first. Perhaps such a sweep will help us narrow down what species of eel fits the description of the monster, or perhaps it will reveal something entirely unexpected. Who can say? I certainly won't pretend to know what might be revealed in the future. All I know for certain is what I've said before and what I will continue to say until it happens. We need to return to Loch Ness. Only then will the mystery of Nessie finally be solved. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, then go down to the description to find links to follow us on DeviantArt, Patreon, and Twitter. While you're there, you'll also find the Amazon links for the original novels Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, and The Occult Mafia. 2 books I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.